In the strange world of quantum mechanics, reality doesn't behave the way we expect. Unlike classical objects, quantum particles don't have definite positions or states until they are measured. Instead, they exist in a cloud of probabilities, a superposition of all possible outcomes. This changes the moment an observation is made. When we look, the wave of probabilities collapses into a specific result. This is called the observer effect. In iconic experiments like the double-slit experiment, a single electron behaves like a wave when unobserved, creating interference patterns as if it passes through both slits simultaneously. But once we place a detector to observe which slit it goes through, the interference disappears. The act of observation itself alters the outcome. Reality, it seems, responds to being watched. This insight shattered centuries of assumptions. In quantum terms, the observer is not a passive bystander but an active participant in shaping physical events. It is not that the mind creates matter, but that consciousness plays a role in selecting among the possible states the world can assume. The boundary between the inner and outer world is not as rigid as we once thought. Now extend this into our everyday lives. If consciousness plays a role in defining outcomes at the microscopic scale, what happens when we direct our focus deliberately? Attention becomes more than awareness, it becomes a sculptor of potential. What you focus on, you influence. The brain itself mirrors this, neural pathways strengthen with attention. The more you think a thought, the more real it becomes, not just in your mind, but in how you act, speak, and move through the world. Your attention acts like a quantum observer, not collapsing particles, but collapsing possibilities in your personal reality. Where your focus goes, energy flows. When you constantly hold fear in your awareness, you reinforce neural and emotional patterns of contraction, limitation, and stress. But when you direct sustained attention toward a desired outcome, whether healing, growth, or connection, you're not just imagining it. You are reorganizing your own internal structure, your chemistry, your perceptions, your habits, and eventually, your external behavior. This isn't metaphysics in disguise, it's supported by neuroscience. Studies show that intentional focus rewires the brain through neuroplasticity. Repeated thought reshapes cortical maps. Visualization activates motor pathways. Belief changes biology. Your attention alters your internal state, and over time, this affects the choices you make, the emotions you generate, and the interactions you attract. At its core, the quantum model suggests that reality is not fixed, it is probabilistic and sensitive to input. In this model, intention becomes a tuning fork, a signal that aligns you with a specific version of reality from among many possible ones. You are not creating from nothing. You are choosing, from an infinite field of potential, a coherent path and walking it with every act of conscious focus. This continuous process of choosing, moment by moment, shapes the trajectory of your life in subtle but powerful ways. The quantum world teaches us that uncertainty is not just a feature of tiny particles, it is a fundamental property of existence. Each thought, each act of attention, nudges reality in a particular direction, collapsing possibilities into experience. When you focus on gratitude, creativity, or hope, your brain starts filtering the world differently. You notice opportunities you might have missed, your body chemistry shifts toward healing and resilience, and your actions begin to align with new outcomes. This isn't magic, it's the cumulative effect of thousands of micro-decisions, each guided by your chosen focus. In a sense, you're editing the script of your life by where you place your awareness. This idea finds echoes in physics, psychology, and even in the fabric of culture. In quantum mechanics, potential is everywhere, but it takes an act of observation to crystallize it. In human experience, dreams and intentions remain unrealized until they are given energy, attention, effort, time. The world you inhabit is the sum of what you choose to notice, believe, and act upon. Just as the observer's gaze brings particles into being, your mindful focus gives shape and substance to the unfolding of your personal reality. So what happens when you become intentional, not just reactive, with your focus. You begin to move from a passive experiencer of life to an active co-author of it. In the quantum model, the field of possibilities is always present, but it responds to coherence. A scattered mind sends mixed signals. But a focused, emotionally charged intention acts like a laser, amplifying one outcome over the rest, pulling it from the haze of probability into the sharpness of form. This principle is echoed in experiments where people trained in focused attention, such as experienced meditators, seem to influence random systems slightly more than chance. While these effects are subtle, they hint at a deep truth: coherence of mind may generate coherence in the environment. Emotion plays a critical role. Thought is the signal, but feeling is the carrier wave. When intention is fused with elevated emotion, joy, awe, love, it becomes magnetic. The quantum field, in this analogy, doesn't respond to words. It responds to the vibration you emit, the signal of your inner state. That's why wanting something isn't enough. If you desire change but dwell emotionally in lack, you're reinforcing the old pattern. But when your thoughts, emotions, and attention are aligned with a new possibility, as if it's already real, you begin to shift your position in the probability space. You tune yourself to a different timeline. In neuroscience, this alignment between attention, intention, and measurable change is grounded in well-established mechanisms. One of the most robust findings is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to focused thought and experience. Studies using fMRI and EEG have shown that mental rehearsal activates the same brain regions as physical practice. For instance, athletes who visualize specific movements can improve performance measurably, even without physical execution. This demonstrates how thought alone, when intentional and repeated, can modify the brain's functional architecture. The Hebbian principle, neurons that fire together, wire together, shows how repeated focus reinforces synaptic pathways, making certain patterns of perception, emotion, and behavior more likely. This biological basis explains how sustained attention changes not just what we think, but how we think, and ultimately what we experience as real. On the quantum scale, while the observer effect is well documented, such as in the double-slit experiment, where detection collapses wave functions, this doesn't mean consciousness is required in the metaphysical sense. But it does show that measurement, an act of interaction or information exchange, alters the outcome. In quantum electrodynamics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle makes it clear that certain properties, like position and momentum, can't be known simultaneously with precision, not because of limits in instruments, but because of how nature operates. Observation is interaction. Interaction changes the system. This parallels how in psychology and behavioral science, cognitive attention functions as a filter. Through the reticular activating system (RAS) in the brainstem, we prioritize what to notice from billions of sensory inputs. Focused intention literally alters perception, both internally, in terms of neurochemistry, and externally, in terms of what we act on and attract. In short, quantum physics shows that potential becomes actuality when measured. Neuroscience shows that focused attention reshapes the brain. Psychology shows that intention and belief alter perception and behavior. Put together, these facts form a scientific foundation for the idea that intention is not wishful thinking, it is a biological, neurological, and quantum analogous force that shapes outcomes over time. This convergence of quantum theory, neuroscience, and psychology paints a compelling picture: our internal states, what we focus on, what we believe, and what we emotionally embody, can have tangible effects on our external reality. In the field of psychoneuroimmunology, research has revealed how thoughts and emotions influence the immune system. For example, prolonged stress or fear activates the hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal, HPA, axis, increasing cortisol levels, which over time can weaken immune response and even alter gene expression through epigenetic mechanisms. Conversely, positive emotional states, induced through practices like mindfulness, gratitude, or coherent heart-brain focus, can reduce inflammation and enhance immune function. The body, in this sense, responds to thought as if it were experience. From a systems theory perspective, the brain and body operate as an open, dynamical system, constantly interacting with the environment. When you focus your attention, you're influencing the flow of information through this system. Studies in electroencephalography, EEG, show that meditation, intention setting, and focused mental states lead to increased coherence between different brain regions, especially in gamma and alpha frequencies, associated with higher awareness, creativity, and integration. Even in quantum biology, researchers have begun to explore how quantum processes, such as quantum tunneling in enzymes or coherent energy transfer in photosynthesis, suggest that living systems may exploit non-classical physics to enhance efficiency. Though speculative, it raises the possibility that life itself might be more deeply embedded in the quantum structure of reality than previously believed. Thus, when we talk about attention shaping reality, we're not invoking mystical forces. We are describing a cascade of physical and informational effects, from subatomic probabilities to neural plasticity to behavior and immune response. The observer in quantum physics collapses a wave function, the human observer, through sustained intention, collapses infinite behavioral futures into lived experience. One is instantaneous, the other accumulates, through repetition, coherence, and emotion, until a new pattern of reality emerges. This accumulation, this slow collapse of possibility into actuality, is what gives power to consistent intention. It's not a single thought that changes reality, but the ongoing alignment of focus, emotion, and behavior that sets a trajectory. Over days, weeks, or months, this coherence becomes measurable, not only in brain scans or blood chemistry but in life outcomes, habits, and relationships. In longitudinal studies on meditation and mindfulness, researchers have documented structural changes in the brain. For example, the prefrontal cortex, associated with decision-making and goal-setting, becomes more active and denser in experienced meditators. The amygdala, which governs fear responses, shows decreased activity. This means the brain becomes more resilient, focused, and emotionally balanced, not through external changes, but through repeated internal focus. In behavioral economics and psychology, the expectancy effect and placebo response further demonstrate how belief and attention influence reality. People given inert substances, placebos, often experience real healing effects simply because they believe in the outcome. This isn't imagination, it's a biological response to an intentional state. Belief alters the brain's chemistry, which in turn affects physiology. The nocebo effect, negative expectations causing harm, proves the same in reverse. Focused attention on illness or fear can worsen symptoms, even when nothing harmful is physically present. We return, then, to the central idea: reality is not fixed and passive, it is interactive and responsive. At the quantum level, measurement creates outcome. At the neural level, attention creates structure. At the behavioral level, intention creates habit. And across all these levels, emotion acts as the amplifier, the signal that gives thought biological weight and real-world direction. In this framework, you are not merely reacting to the world, you are participating in its unfolding. The observer effect isn't limited to physics labs. It is alive in your daily choices, in where you place your awareness, and in how deeply you embody the future you seek. Every moment, whether you're aware of it or not, you're tuning yourself like an instrument, adjusting your internal frequency through thought, feeling, and focus. And this inner frequency acts like a signal, interacting with the external world in ways both subtle and profound. Think of your mind as a lens. Wherever it points, reality begins to crystallize. Not instantly, not magically, but through small shifts that accumulate like drops carving stone. If you continually dwell on limitation, your nervous system adapts to survive, not to thrive. But if you persistently orient toward expansion, toward possibility, your biology responds with openness, flexibility, and growth. This isn't philosophy, it's physics, it's biology, it's behavior. When your thoughts are aligned with elevated emotional states, like inspiration, compassion, or wonder, you move into physiological coherence. Heart rate, breath, and brain waves begin to synchronize. Your body enters a state where healing accelerates, creativity increases, and stress hormones fall. This state is not just a fleeting experience, it's a trainable condition. Practices like focused breathing, visualization, and mindful awareness don't just feel good, they alter the electromagnetic fields of the heart, measurable by instruments like magnetocardiograms. Your heart is not just a pump, it's an information center. And when your intention is clear and emotionally charged, it radiates coherence through your entire system. Meanwhile, your subconscious, the silent architect of your behaviors, takes cues from repetition. It doesn't respond to fleeting desires but to consistent signals. That's why one clear, emotionally rich intention practiced daily can create more change than 1,000 scattered thoughts. Reality isn't something that happens to you. It's something that responds to the signals you send, with your biology, your focus, your emotional frequency. And once you realize that, attention becomes sacred. It's not just noticing, it's choosing. When you begin to understand that attention is not passive but causal, your relationship with reality transforms. You're no longer a spectator of events, you become a participant in the orchestration of experience itself. Every thought you think isn't isolated, it triggers a cascade of biological responses, neurotransmitters fire, hormones release, neural circuits light up. This isn't metaphorical, it's measurable. For instance, repetitive thoughts of anxiety activate the limbic system, especially the amygdala, reinforcing fear-based responses and keeping the body in survival mode. But when you shift your focus toward empowerment or peace, the prefrontal cortex takes the lead, calming primitive reactions and allowing higher reasoning, creativity, and long-term vision to emerge. This shift is not just psychological, it has deep physical consequences. Brain scans reveal that consistent mental focus can increase gray matter density in regions linked to memory, empathy, and emotional regulation. Over time, the brain begins to mirror the internal world you prioritize. It adapts to your thoughts. Zooming out to the quantum level again, the idea of the observer challenges our classical view of an objective, detached universe. Particles exist in a superposition, multiple possible states, until measured. It's not that your mind forces reality into existence in a mystical sense, but that interaction with a system changes its outcome. At the smallest scales, what becomes real depends on how we engage with it. This mirrors what happens in life. Your future is not a fixed path, it is a probabilistic field. Every decision, every act of focus, every belief you reinforce shifts the likelihood of one future over another. Like a quantum system, your reality is always in flux, always responsive. And your perception, your interpretation of events, collapses infinite meanings into one experienced truth. But here's where it becomes even more fascinating. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish strongly between imagination and actual experience. If you repeatedly visualize a desired outcome, while feeling it fully as if it's already happening, your body begins to live as if it were real. You release the same neurochemicals. You condition your future self. Athletes, musicians, and high performers use this to rehearse success before it unfolds. This isn't visualization for wishful thinking, it's neurological programming. And it works. Over time, these imagined futures become internal blueprints. Your behavior starts to match them. You notice different things in the environment. You act with more congruence. You attract new results not through mysticism, but through internal alignment and behavioral resonance. The field of potential narrows into actuality, because you kept choosing it. So when you ask, can thought change reality? The answer is yes, but not by force. By focus. By repetition. By coherence. Reality listens most to the mind that knows what it's asking for and feels it in the body before it arrives. In that alignment, you stop chasing the future, and start embodying it. To truly grasp how thought and intention interact with reality, we need to look deeper, not only into quantum mechanics or neuroscience, but into how time, possibility, and identity intertwine in the human experience. At any given moment, you're not just living in the present, you're navigating between potential futures. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly scans the environment, compares it to past experience, and projects forward. But what few realize is that where you place your attention actively reshapes the probabilities your brain considers. You are continuously sculpting the architecture of your possible tomorrows by what you dwell on today. When you think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, and react in the same way, your brain and body enter a loop. These neural and biochemical feedback loops create something like an energetic signature, stable, familiar, predictable. The same inputs, the same outputs. Reality reflects this back to you in the form of repeated patterns, similar relationships, recurring setbacks, familiar moods. You become, in effect, a feedback echo of your past self. But now imagine deliberately interrupting that loop. You wake up and instead of revisiting the same thoughts, worry, resentment, distraction, you introduce something new, a coherent intention, emotionally anchored in the future you want to live. You don't just think positive, you feel elevated, focused, clear. That signal, neurologically, hormonally, energetically, is different from the past. Your heart rhythm shifts. Your brain waves stabilize. Your immune system even begins to upregulate genes associated with health and resilience. You become, quite literally, a different informational field than the one you woke up in. This process is not imaginary. It's been measured in clinical studies, especially in practices like heart math and deep meditation. People who maintain a state of heart-brain coherence can not only lower cortisol and increase DHEA, a longevity hormone, but also show improvements in gene expression, cognitive performance, and emotional stability. Their reality, inside and out, changes measurably. Let's bring this back to quantum physics. In the double-slit experiment, the presence of measurement, the mere act of registering a choice, collapses the wave of probability into a definite outcome. On the macroscopic scale, something similar happens when you begin acting and feeling as if your future were already in motion. You're not just visualizing a different life, you're embodying a new self, and this embodiment acts as the measurement that collapses potential into reality. There is no magic here, only mechanics. But the mechanics are subtle, nonlinear, and incredibly sensitive. Tiny changes in mental focus today can compound into entirely different futures tomorrow. This is not just true in personal development, it's how complex systems evolve. A butterfly effect of the mind. You're not simply a product of your environment, you are a modifier of it. Your thoughts aren't isolated, they ripple. Your emotional state isn't private, it radiates. And over time, this self-generated field of perception and energy influences what people mirror back to you, what opportunities show up, and how resilient or vulnerable your body becomes. In this light, intention is not a wish, it is a lever. And thought, when paired with emotion and repetition, becomes a tool of navigation. The more coherent the signal, the clearer the path. You're not forcing the universe to bend to your will, you're tuning yourself to a version of it that already contains what you seek. Like tuning a radio, you don't create the station, you align with it. And when your inner world changes consistently enough, the outer world begins to reorganize, not instantly, but inevitably. Over time, this inner reorganization creates a kind of gravitational pull, a coherent personal field that begins to attract experiences, people, and outcomes that match its frequency. This isn't a metaphor. In systems theory, coherent systems exert more influence than chaotic ones. A laser is powerful not because it contains more light than a bulb, but because its waves are in perfect phase alignment, a focused, orderly signal. The same applies to human consciousness. The more ordered your thoughts and emotions, the more impact they have on the trajectory of your life. In this context, intention is a form of internal resonance. It's not enough to want something vaguely or occasionally. What changes reality is sustained inner order, mental clarity, emotional alignment, and consistent focus over time. These elements work together to reshape the landscape of your choices, responses, and interactions. This process even has parallels in quantum field theory, where particles are no longer seen as isolated points but as excitations of underlying fields. Everything is connected by invisible structures of potential. Your thoughts and feelings, though not particles, are real informational patterns, organized flows of energy that interact with your body, brain, and environment. The more structured those patterns are, the more likely they are to influence outcomes, just like energy moving through a well-tuned circuit creates a stable current. And when these patterns become habitual, when thinking from your future becomes more familiar than remembering your past, you cross a threshold. The brain is no longer just reflecting your memories, it's forecasting your identity. You begin to act, speak, and perceive from the vantage point of your next evolution. This shift doesn't require external confirmation. The evidence starts within: a calmer nervous system, faster problem solving, more synchronicities, and a sense of inner authority over your life. Even epigenetic science supports this. Genes are not destiny, they are options. What determines which genes express is not just heredity, but environment, and your inner state is part of that environment. Your stress, your joy, your coherence, these signal molecular messengers that can activate or suppress genes related to inflammation, aging, or healing. In other words, your mind, through biochemical intermediaries, literally influences your biology at the genetic level. None of this means you control everything. Life is still unpredictable. But what you do control, the lens through which you perceive, the focus you sustain, and the emotional field you live in, has a far greater effect on reality than we were ever taught. This is not wishful thinking. It is a disciplined interaction with a responsive universe. When you understand this, your attention becomes sacred. Not because it's spiritual, but because it is the interface between your inner world and the world that responds. What you rehearse becomes who you are. Who you are becomes what you notice. And what you notice becomes your life. The real transformation begins when this understanding becomes embodied, when it's no longer an idea, but a felt experience. That's when the brain, heart, and body begin to operate in synchrony. In this state, you're no longer chasing change from the outside in, you're generating change from the inside out. This coherence, measurable in real time through heart rate variability, HRV, and brainwave synchronization, marks a biological signature of alignment. When you hold a clear intention, a focused mental image of a desired future, while sustaining an elevated emotion, gratitude, love, excitement, you enter a state where your physiology begins to mirror the chemistry of that future now. You're no longer waiting for something outside of you to change how you feel the change first, and that feeling starts reorganizing your biology and behavior to match it. Think of it this way: if you can emotionally inhabit the future you desire long enough, with enough clarity and repetition, your body begins to believe that future is already happening. And it starts acting accordingly, adjusting your immune function, hormonal balance, posture, tone of voice, decisions. It's a bottom-up shift, where belief doesn't just stay in the mind, it cascades into the body and eventually into reality. From the perspective of quantum potential, what you're doing is increasing the likelihood that a particular version of the future becomes actualized. You're not forcing it, you're making it more probable by aligning your energy, actions, and emotions with that outcome. It's like repeatedly striking the same chord on a piano. Eventually, the room begins to hum with its resonance. This is also supported by the neuroscience of mirror neurons and predictive coding. Your brain doesn't passively observe reality, it actively predicts it based on prior inputs. When you repeatedly expose your mind to visions of your desired future, accompanied by the appropriate emotional signals, you are training your predictive machinery to expect it. And when the brain expects something, it becomes hypersensitive to cues that align with that expectation. It begins selecting, filtering, and prioritizing information that reinforces that storyline. Suddenly, things that once seemed invisible, opportunities, connections, ideas, begin showing up. But they were always there. You just weren't tuned to them. You hadn't yet become the version of yourself that could perceive and act on them. This is why change doesn't begin with action, it begins with identity. If you act from your old self, the change you make will be temporary, fragile, and tiring. But if you first become the person who naturally chooses the new path, then the behaviors follow with ease. They are no longer disciplines to maintain, they are expressions of who you are. And who you are is not fixed. You are a process, a field of potential, a conscious observer collapsing experience from the quantum fog into the clarity of form. The more aligned your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors become, the more reality begins to reflect your coherence, not your history. At this point, transformation is no longer about self-improvement, it becomes self-emergence. You're not fixing the past, you're embodying the future, now. And the more consistently you return to that internal state, the more momentum builds. Your nervous system begins to expect coherence. Your body starts to crave alignment. Your perception naturally filters out noise and seeks patterns that match the signal you've trained it to recognize. This isn't about pretending. It's about becoming neurologically and energetically congruent with the life you're calling in. In fact, experiments in psychophysiology show that when people enter deep states of inner order, like heart-brain coherence, there are ripple effects beyond the individual. The electromagnetic field generated by the human heart, measurable up to several feet from the body, shifts in structure during states of compassion or gratitude. These shifts, according to studies by institutions like the HeartMath Institute, can influence the nervous systems of people nearby, synchronizing rhythms and inducing calm or clarity. In other words, coherence is contagious. Even more intriguingly, random number generator experiments, like those in the Global Consciousness Project, suggest that human attention, especially when collective and emotionally coherent, may influence statistical systems in subtle but measurable ways. These findings remain on the edge of scientific consensus, but they echo something ancient wisdom has always suggested: consciousness is not confined to the skull. It interacts with reality. So what does this mean for how we live? It means your most powerful tool isn't control. It's alignment. It means you don't need to wait for external validation to change internally. It means that who you become in each moment influences what becomes possible in the next. The mistake most people make is trying to change outer circumstances while staying emotionally anchored to their past. But reality doesn't shift from force, it shifts from frequency. When your inner signal becomes coherent, clear intention, elevated emotion, repeated embodiment, you begin to match the signature of the reality you want to experience. In this state, intention becomes more than desire. It becomes a directive. Not to the universe in a mystical sense, but to yourself, your biology, your behavior, and ultimately your world. You are no longer repeating a known past. You are rehearsing and embodying an unknown but chosen future. And through that act, the improbable becomes inevitable. Over time, this chosen future ceases to be a distant vision, it becomes your default internal reality, and your external world starts organizing around it. Not overnight, not with dramatic fanfare, but with subtle precision, through unexpected meetings, new impulses, fresh insights, and synchronicities that seem too well-timed to be random. This is the cumulative power of quantum-aligned living, reality reshaped not by effort, but by resonance. And this brings us to a profound realization: your identity is programmable. Just as a quantum system responds differently depending on how it is observed, you respond differently to life depending on how you observe yourself. If you wake up every day identifying as the version of you shaped by trauma, doubt, or lack, your nervous system prepares for that version of reality. Your cells, your choices, your emotions follow suit. The past repeats. But if you deliberately step into the identity of the version of you who has already transformed, already healed, already succeeded, your physiology responds just as powerfully. This is not delusion. It's neuroepigenetic conditioning. You're feeding your system a new internal signal, and that signal starts to modify gene expression, rewire synaptic patterns, and influence the chemical baseline of your daily life. From the viewpoint of quantum cognition, you're collapsing different yous into experience based on your mental emotional state. And since consciousness plays a role in organizing experience, not just observing it, you hold the key to which future version of yourself becomes realized. That's why deep, consistent inner work is more impactful than external action alone. The outer world is lagging data, a delayed reflection of your previous inner states. If you want to change what you see, you must first change the signal you emit. And the most coherent signal is born not from desperation or control, but from trust, clarity, and embodiment. Ultimately, the future is not something that happens to you. It is something you tune yourself into, with every thought you think, every emotion you nurture, every action you align. In the quantum field of potential, countless timelines already exist. The question is, which version of yourself are you repeatedly collapsing into being? The idea that your future self already exists as a possibility is not just poetic, it is supported by the mathematics of quantum physics, particularly in interpretations like the many worlds theory or the multiverse hypothesis. According to these models, all possible outcomes exist in a superposed state until observed. This isn't science fiction, it's a serious philosophical implication of the Schrödinger equation. Reality, at its core, isn't fixed, it's probabilistic. The act of observation, or measurement, selects one outcome from among many. Now apply this to identity. At any moment, you are standing at the crossroads of infinite possible versions of yourself, the you who overcame addiction, the you who started a company, the you who healed from trauma, the you who wrote the book, the you who never got out of bed. All these versions exist as potential energy, not yet realized, but mathematically valid. The determining factor. The internal signal you embody today. That signal, your thoughts, your emotions, your physiological state, acts like a selector, collapsing one version of your identity from the cloud of probabilities into actual experience. This isn't metaphorical. When you change your emotional baseline, when you commit to new thought patterns, when your actions begin to align with your envisioned self, you're essentially sending a consistent signal into the field, this is who I am now. And as you stabilize that signal, the universe begins to respond in kind, not because it's granting your wish, but because your inner coherence aligns with the structure of one possible future and brings it into focus. This process is not instantaneous. It's evolutionary. You don't quantum leap into a new life by force of will, you entangle with it over time. Through repetition, belief, behavior, and especially emotion, you build resonance with the version of yourself you want to experience. And like a tuning fork vibrating near another, resonance creates attraction. Reality begins to shift, not in giant waves, but in incremental patterns, unexpected meetings, ideas, impulses, opportunities. This is what mystics called synchronicity, what science might frame as pattern recognition aligned with probabilistic shift. Even the placebo effect, studied for decades, reveals how the body responds to belief and expectation. When someone takes a sugar pill but believes it's medicine, measurable healing occurs. The brain releases endorphins. Immune markers improve. Pain subsides. Why? Because belief alters biology. It sends a signal of safety, of trust, of recovery, and the body responds as if the external change already happened. This is embodied perception acting as reality's editor. So now, let's connect it all. Quantum physics shows us that potential collapses into reality based on interaction. Neuroscience shows that the brain adapts to repeated internal experience, whether real or imagined. Epigenetics shows that gene expression responds dynamically to emotion, thought, and environmental signals. Psychology shows that expectation and belief guide behavior, perception, and outcome. Together, they point to a powerful truth: you are not just observing your life, you are generating it. And the future is not ahead of you in time, it is inside you in potential. When you become emotionally familiar with your chosen future, when it feels more real than your past, your biology upgrades to match it. Your brain begins filtering the world through that lens. Your behaviors reflect new values. The people around you respond differently. And reality, piece by piece, reorganizes itself, not magically, but structurally, to confirm the new version of you that you dared to embody first. This is not positive thinking. This is quantum embodiment. And the most profound part? You can start at any moment. No permission required. No external sign. Just a choice. A breath. A shift in focus. A new signal. And a willingness to repeat it, until the improbable becomes inevitable. When you fully accept that your reality is not predetermined but emergent, you begin to live from a place of conscious authorship rather than unconscious reaction. This changes everything: your mindset, your behavior, your physiology, and ultimately, the events that unfold around you. Let's expand this idea structurally. Brain 1. The brain as a prediction engine. Neuroscience now understands the brain not as a passive receiver of reality, but as a prediction machine. It uses past data to anticipate what's coming next, and then filters the present through those expectations. This model is known as predictive processing. In this framework, your experience of reality isn't a raw reflection of the world. It's a simulation that your brain is constantly updating. The more emotional and repetitive your past experiences, the stronger the brain clings to them as templates for the future. Here's the twist: you can consciously disrupt this loop. When you start feeding your brain new visions, paired with real emotional engagement, you're training it to expect something different. This isn't daydreaming. It's data input. If repeated enough, the new pattern becomes the default, and the brain starts filtering reality as if that vision were already true. In doing so, it helps summon the circumstances to confirm it. DNA 2. Epigenetics, biology that listens to thought. Your DNA is not a rigid code that dictates who you are. Instead, epigenetics has shown that genes are switched on or off based on environmental and emotional signals. Hormones, neurotransmitters, and even thought-driven chemical messengers like neuropeptides act as the bridge between mind and biology. In states of fear, stress, or hopelessness, genes associated with inflammation, aging, and cellular decay may activate. But in elevated states, gratitude, love, optimism, genes tied to healing, longevity, and neuroplasticity come online. Your thoughts, especially when repeated and emotionally charged, create real biochemical consequences. The gene is the keyboard, your internal state plays the melody. Globe with Meridians 3. Quantum reality, fields of infinite possibility. In quantum field theory, what we call particles are actually localized excitations of underlying fields. That means what appears solid is simply a region where a field is vibrating in a particular way. These fields are always present, always filled with latent potential. They contain all possible versions of outcomes, waiting to be activated by interaction. The act of observation, whether in a lab or in life, is what causes one potential to emerge from the field. This doesn't imply magical thinking, but it does imply participatory reality. Your choices, your focus, your internal alignment are forms of interaction. And through them, you engage with the field, not from the outside, but as part of it. In this sense, you're not creating your future from thin air. You're collapsing a possibility that was always there, but needed your alignment to become visible. Compass 4. Identity as a navigator of timelines. Who you believe you are sets the coordinates for the timeline you walk. Identity is not fixed, it's constructed. But once formed, it acts like a magnet, drawing thoughts, emotions, actions, and outcomes into harmony with it. If you believe I'm stuck, your thoughts and behaviors will match. If you believe I'm growing, the brain begins rewiring for novelty, openness, and resilience. The key is emotional congruence. The subconscious does not respond to words, it responds to feeling. If you say, "I'm abundant," but feel scarcity, your body listens to the feeling. But if you begin to feel abundant, by anchoring into gratitude, joy, sufficiency, your biology reorients. Over time, so does your behavior. And then, so does your world. Repeat button 5. Repetition, the gateway to realignment. Nothing changes without repetition. Neural pathways form through use-dependent plasticity. The more you think a thought, feel a feeling, and act in alignment, the more automatic it becomes. Your conscious mind sets the direction, but it's repetition that builds the road. This is why the most powerful transformations are subtle and daily. 5 minutes a day of feeling into your future with clarity and elevated emotion will do more than hours of scattered effort. Why? Because it's not about how long you practice. It's about how coherently you do. With enough repetition, you stop trying to be different. You just are different. And your environment, responding to this new signal, begins to shift accordingly. Magnet 6. Synchronicity and the holographic universe. Once you consistently hold an inner state, life begins to mirror it. You think of someone and they call. An idea you've been contemplating shows up in a book or video. A conversation reveals exactly the insight you needed. These events are not coincidences in the traditional sense. They are signs of resonance, of alignment between your internal vibration and the structure of the field around you. In a holographic universe, the part reflects the whole. The micro reflects the macro. When you shift, your hologram shifts. This is the state mystics called flow or oneness. It is not mystical escape, it is neuroenergetic synchronization with a probabilistic, participatory cosmos. Unlocked conclusion: you are the interface. You are not just living inside a universe. You are in dialogue with it. Your nervous system, your thoughts, your emotions, these are not private. They are inputs into a responsive field that encodes infinite futures. So the real question is not what do you want to happen? It is, what are you tuning yourself to? What version of yourself are you emotionally rehearsing, neurologically embodying, and energetically signaling, again and again? That version is already waiting in the field. Not someday. Not after proof. Now. It is summoned not by force, but by coherence, clarity, and courageous embodiment. You don't need to wait for reality to change. Reality is waiting for you to tune in. So in the end, this is not a journey of control, it's a journey of alignment. You are not here to chase outcomes, to force your future into being, or to endlessly fix what's broken. You are here to remember your power as the observer, the signaler, the conscious participant in a living, intelligent universe. When your thoughts are clear, your emotions coherent, and your actions aligned, you're no longer reacting to the world, you're communicating with it. You're stepping into the version of yourself that no longer waits for change, but embodies it, breath by breath. This is the science of possibility made personal. It is quantum theory made living flesh. It is the biology of belief, the physics of focus, the chemistry of intention. And it all begins in one silent, powerful moment. The moment you decide to become the future you desire, before the world gives you permission. Because the moment you believe it fully, feel it deeply, and live it daily, you won't need to seek confirmation. Reality will rise to meet you,